2008, a man was riding the bus alone at night when he heard screaming. Confused, he looked back a couple rows and spotted a man named Vince Lee calmly and methodically stabbing another sleeping passenger. The driver veered the bus to the side of the road as the passengers started screaming for help and banging on the windows, desperately trying to flee. However, Vince never even flinched. That was until a few people tried to save the man under attack, who was named Tim McLean. Vince's calm, seemingly robotic demeanor quickly changed to anger as he chased the men away with his knife, forcing the hopeful rescuers outside of the bus. This left only Vince and Tim McLean inside. The passengers called the police and tried to think of a plan to help McLean, but it was too late. They watched in horror as Vince began dismembering the body. He then walked closer to the window and looked into the crowd while consuming the remains. Since the police were still minutes away, the crowd had made the brave decision of trying to keep Vince locked inside the bus. They armed themselves with anything they could find and held the door shut until help arrived. And after a night-long standoff with the police, Vince tried to break a window to escape, but was quickly tased and detained. Ultimately, Vincent Lee was sentenced to stay at a high-security mental health facility due to severe untreated schizophrenia.
She hired a hit against her parents so she could be with her dealer boyfriend. This is the Pan family case from the new Netflix documentary What Jennifer Did, summarized in less than 3 minutes, so full spoilers ahead. Jennifer's parents, Han and Bick, were immigrants and they worked really hard for everything they had, so they had pretty high expectations for their children. One thing I don't think the Netflix doc really dived enough into was just how controlling and strict Han and Bick were, but I really do think it was out of love and wanting great things for their children. But their daughter Jennifer was not the kind of student that they were hoping for. Her grades in high school were average at best and failing at worst. So Jennifer would create fake report cards with straight A's to show her parents. Jennifer actually must have been a Photoshop wizard because she faked everything, diplomas, acceptance letters, you name it. So by the time Jennifer's in her early 20s, her parents think that she graduated high school straight A's, got early admission into college on a full scholarship, graduated college with honors, and was working at a hospital. But in reality, Jennifer had never even graduated high school, let alone attended college, and was dating a substance dealer, Daniel Wong. Jennifer's web of lies started to unravel, and her parents were learning just how much of a liar their daughter was, and they were pissed, especially about her relationship with Daniel. Jennifer's parents didn't want her dating at all, but especially not a criminal like Daniel. They thought that Jennifer was better than that, and her father told her, "You can date him when I'm dead." And Jennifer took that literally. Daniel actually ended up breaking up with Jennifer because he felt like the relationship was more drama than it was actually worth, and this sent Jennifer over the edge. She had to be with Daniel, even if that meant getting rid of her parents. So with Daniel's help, Jennifer hired 3 hitmen, Leonard, Eric, and David, to take out her parents. So on November 8th, 2010, Jennifer would let those 3 men into her home who would shoot her parents multiple times. Jennifer's mother, Bick, had no idea that her daughter was involved, and her last words were actually, "Don't hurt my daughter." It's heart-shattering. Jennifer then called 911 and told them that men came in to rob them but ended up shooting her parents. Thankfully, Jennifer's father, Han, survived but was in a coma. From the start, investigators were confused about Jennifer's story because it really didn't make any sense. And at the same time they start cracking down on Jennifer, her father wakes up from his coma and confirms that his daughter was involved. All of this because they didn't want their daughter dating a substance dealer. Jennifer and her co-conspirators all received life in prison except Eric, who took a plea deal and got 18 years, but he did ultimately end up passing away in prison not long after. As of just last year, Jennifer and the rest of her co-conspirators' convictions were overturned and they were all awarded free trials.
You would think that you would read the headline and scroll away, right? Wrong. I looked into it and now I have to tell you about it. Darlington, England, 1998. Julie Patterson was born in Durham. I think you say it Durham. Durham. She had an older brother and they lost their mom when they were really young. At the time of this case, Julie was 32 years old and she had 4 children. She had been struggling a lot with her mental health and it seems like she was trying to do everything she could to fight what she was going through, but she just couldn't get away from it. Mental health is no joke. When things are bad, even if it's just in your head and you know it's only in your head, the mind is so powerful. It can really make you feel like it's never going to get better, and that's the way that Julie felt. Unfortunately, Julie didn't seem fit to take care of her 4 kids, so they were put into foster care. During this time, Julie was sharing a flat with a man named Alan Taylor. He was the father to her youngest child. It seems like their relationship was pretty healthy. They were happy living together. One night in April of 1998, Julie headed to the pub to have herself a night, which wasn't unusual, except for that night, she did not come home. That itself, the fact that she didn't come home wasn't alarming. Julie had done that before, but it was when she didn't come home in time for one of her scheduled visits to see her children, that's when alarm bells were going off. Because Julie loved her kids, she would not miss a visit. Alan Taylor, her boyfriend that she lived with, also didn't worry until a few days in, because again, she had done this before and she would always return back home safely. But when she missed her appointment, Alan went straight to the police and he explained the entire situation to them. Luckily, they took it seriously because of Julie's past with her mental health struggles. Both police and Alan thought that Julie may have done something to herself. They started search parties that lasted days. They were looking in fields, lakes, rivers, woods. They had officers, detectives, investigators, even brought in sniffer dogs, but there was no sign of Julie. Weeks passed with no new information, and Officer David Davies was asked to join the search with his police dog named Tyler. Tyler was a German Shepherd and he was trained to sniff out human scent. David and his dog Tyler were walking around the area they were assigned to look at when Tyler started going crazy. He's barking, he's jumping, he's alerting to David that he has found something, but he was barking at nothing. Tyler the dog was alerting to right behind the back of a fence that was a little bit on a hill, I think. It was taller than normal human height and David could not look over it. Instead, he found a little area in the fence that he could stick his hand through, managed to put his hand in there and starts feeling around, which bold move, could never be me. He's feeling around, he can't really feel anything, but he starts smelling a foul smell. Something that was smelling like it was rotting. It was weird. So he put Tyler in his car. He went around to the front of the house to see if he could get a better look. An older lady is now standing at the front yard and he's shining his flashlight because it's dark out towards the bags, and the lady says, "Oh, don't worry about that. Some kids were just running around the other day and they just threw the bag over the fence." She's like, "I'm sure it's nothing." And David asks the lady, "Well, do you mind if I go through your backyard and take a closer look at it?" He says sure. He walks towards the bag, opens the bag. Inside the bag there's a pillowcase. Inside the pillowcase, decomposed human body, maggots, flies, and the bad smell that he was smelling. He wasn't sure if it was a human body at first or not. Because of the state of it, it was so badly decomposed that he couldn't tell, and also it fit inside of a pillowcase. Human body does not fit inside of a pillowcase, obviously, so the size of it kind of threw him off. He called for backup. They came, took the pillowcase, tested the things inside the pillowcase. When they finally got back the results, it was confirmed that inside the pillowcase was the decomposed torso of 32-year-old Julie Patterson. Cause of death ruled a homicide. This is now headline news, right? There are so many questions, zero answers. All they have is the torso of a person that was reported missing. The day after this is reported and it's in the newspaper, the police get a call. A group of men call in saying that they have a friend named David Harker. In the last couple of days, David had been chatting not only to them, but also to people at the pub that he had murdered someone and that his victim's name was Julie. Who is David Harker? David Harker was a 24-year-old guy that was previously known as a very charming guy. Girls found him conventionally attractive. He was outgoing, he was tall, he had a cool look to him that made girls like him, I guess. But apart from that, David was obsessed with serial killers, and he was obsessed with them not in the way that he found them intriguing. He agreed that people that did that kind of stuff were messed up in the head, and he found it interesting to study their brains, analyze whatever it is that's wired wrong in those people's minds. No. He was obsessed with them in the way that he looked up to them. He respected them because they did things that he wanted to do, crimes that he wanted to commit and get away with. He would have fantasies about becoming a serial killer himself. He was very open about that as well. He would verbally express that to his friends and honestly to anyone that would listen to him. I guess his friends didn't take it seriously because David was also kind of odd and he said all these crazy things, but when they saw Julie's name in the newspaper, they finally thought, oh shit. He's been saying he killed someone. He's been saying her name is Julie. Now there's a dead person that was found in the newspaper. He must be telling the truth. Let me give you an example of what I mean when I say he was kind of odd. He had 2 tattoos of words on the sides of his head. One was the word subhuman and the other word was disorder tattooed on his scalp. Like he wanted those tattoos. He paid money for them. Remember, his friends are the ones that are calling police to give him his name. And it sounds like by the way that they were describing him, David kind of had 2 different sides to him. One that was well liked by anyone that he met, that people loved being around, and the second one that was dark, mysterious, and borderline concerning. Police get a search warrant and they go to search David's apartment, knock on the door. David's not home, so they go inside. The man did not even try to conceal the crime scene that was inside his apartment. I mean, blood everywhere on the walls, on the stairs, on the ceilings, on the door, all over the floor and leading to the basement. the basement. Officers could tell that whatever happened in the basement. Immediately, it's taped off as a crime scene, and a team of officers is investigating the crime scene while a different team of officers go to arrest David Harker. Turns out David was already in a holding cell for some kind of robbery. They just arrested him from there and got him ready for questioning. When they questioned him, this is where his obsession for serial killers and crime really shined in a negative way. Because David could not wait to talk about what he did. He described to the police all of his actions that resulted in his apartment being in the state that it was in from start to finish. His story was that he met Julie at that pub the night that she went. He was the half of him that was very charming, and Julie was very into it. So they went back together to his apartment and they had sex, and David described that interaction as boring. And then he got up, went to the bathroom, walked back over to the bed, and the second evil half of him took control over him. He grabbed Julie's tights from the floor, put them around her, and just started strangling her. He did that to her until she had lost her life, and then he had sex with her again after she was no longer living, and then he got her body and dragged her to the basement. Okay, warning, stop eating. David then grabbed every tool or thing that he could use as a weapon in his house, took it down to the basement, and then just started chopping up pieces of her thigh. He cuts off pieces of meat. He goes upstairs with the pieces of meat to the kitchen, seasons them with garlic, and then puts them in a pan to cook. Meanwhile, he's making some pasta as well. And when it was time to plate, he added the meat to the pasta dish, added more garlic, more cheese, and sauce, and he served it, and then he ate his meal. He then went to sleep. Did not clean up one bit, just headed to bed, went to sleep. He did that again for the next 2 weeks. Anytime that he would get hungry, he would just go down to the basement and grab more meat. He literally did that until he couldn't anymore because the smell of the body decomposing was so strong. Because it's a human body. And then finally after that, he was like, oh, I should probably get rid of this human body. Which is really when he cut it into pieces, put the torso inside the pillowcase in the trash bag, dumped the trash bag in some random yard. With that, David Harker had confessed, but he was only charged with manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, whatever that means, honestly. The rest of her body has never been found. Officers have followed hundreds and hundreds of leads, taken hundreds and hundreds of statements, but they've never been able to find it, and David refuses to let anyone know where the rest of her body is. Julie Patterson's family knew that she was missing, of course, and they knew that she had been found no longer alive, but they didn't really know the details of the crime. But Julie Patterson was a mother, she was a daughter, she was a grandchild, she was a friend, and so many of her loved ones found out what had really happened to her through the news, which is absolutely soul crushing. Like, I have goosebumps. David was sentenced to life in prison, but his minimum amount of years that he had to be in prison before being eligible for parole was only 14 years. The idea that someone that did that to a person and is capable of doing that, like killing someone period, but then killing someone and doing that to her body for the next 2 weeks, the idea that someone like that could be released and just put back out into society is terrifying. I know that he tried to apply for parole in October 2021 and he was denied. I don't think he has tried to get out on parole again, but the thought of that literally is so scary. David Harker from jail sent a letter. Well, actually, Julie's former husband had sent a letter to David asking where the rest of her body was because he was seeking to really get closure and he felt he couldn't do that without finding the rest of her body. So he sent David a letter in jail asking to please let them know where the rest of her body is. And David's letter back to him was sick. I'm going to read part of it. It says, quote, "You ask why I have done this evil thing. Well, I could endlessly speak about murder, mutilation, decapitation, and cannibalism, but a man of your intellect wouldn't be able to grasp any of it. So to give you something that you could understand, 1, I killed all the people I did because I enjoyed it." Oh, also, he was claiming to have killed other people. I don't think that he did. There was no proof of that. Back to the letter. "I killed all the people I did because I enjoyed it. Do you hate the evil man who chopped up and ate your wife? I am not evil, Mr. Newman, but I am a monster. Don't bother writing to me again or I will show you terror unbound. I do have your address now. Goodbye, Mr. Newman." Ugh, he's so creepy. I am not evil, but I am a monster. You are terrifying. The death of Julie drove her older brother almost to insanity because he felt like he couldn't really move past it and couldn't bear the idea that some of Julie's body was still somewhere out there in the world and no one had found it. And the rest of her family, as expected, were also completely heartbroken. It was a hard loss for all of them, and it's really terrible and really sad.
This 15-year-old girl killed her father to be with her 19-year-old boyfriend. But this case is most well known for having the most bizarre police interrogation in all of true crime.
We can do this the nice way, or we can do it the hard way, and I can release my bipolar.
Aaron Fryer was the father to 3 daughters, his oldest child being 15-year-old Ellie. Ellie was known to be incredibly intelligent and also very bright for her age, but she was also said to be incredibly manipulative. Raising Ellie through her teen years was not easy on Aaron. Allegedly, when Ellie was only 13 years old, she was caught sleeping with another student on the school bus. Somehow things only got worse when she turned 15 and got a new boyfriend, 19-year-old Gavin. Gavin is a very odd and sleazy character in today's case. He was the kind of older, creepy guy that would hang around outside the local middle school to try and pick up preteen girls. There was also a running joke at Gavin's high school, which is not funny at all. This is not a funny joke, but students would say that if there was ever going to be an active shooter at school, that it would most likely be Gavin. And when it came out that 19-year-old Gavin had started dating 15-year-old Ellie, he lost a majority of his friends and was bullied so badly at school that he dropped out of high school only 3 months short of graduation. And obviously, Ellie's father, Aaron, did not approve of this relationship. He tried to forbid Ellie from seeing Gavin. He threatened Gavin with a firearm to stay away from his underage daughter, and when none of it seemed to work, he actually pressed charges against Gavin for statutory SA. Ellie is only 15, and when you're 15, you think that your relationship is your entire life and you would die without this person. So she began to scheme with her boyfriend, Gavin, and also Gavin's older friend, a 22-year-old boy named Russell, on how she could escape her father and be with her boyfriend. Ellie's original plan was that she would just run away and be with Gavin, but it was actually the friend Russell's idea that they should just get rid of her father so he couldn't go out looking for her, and Ellie thought that this was a great idea, that they would just kill her father, but her boyfriend Gavin did not want to commit murder. So Ellie spent the next handful of months trying to convince Gavin to go along with Russell's plan to kill her father. She told Gavin that her father was actually the abusive predator in her life and he was doing a lot of inappropriate things with her. And she also told Gavin that she was pregnant and it was his job to protect her and their unborn child. We've never been able to confirm or deny if Ellie's accusations against her father were real, but we do know with 100% certainty that Ellie was never pregnant. She never thought she was pregnant, and this was only a way to manipulate Gavin to go along with this plan, and it worked because he did agree to kill her father. On September 30th, 2017, Gavin and Russell attempted to break into Aaron's home only to retreat after they saw that Aaron's girlfriend was also spending the night. So they came back a couple days later on October 2nd to commit the grisly act. When Gavin snuck in through the bedroom window, he actually tripped over a trash can and woke up Ellie's father, Aaron. Ellie apologized to her father and said that she was the one who tripped over the trash can when she was going to the bathroom. And her father said, "Oh my gosh, please stop scaring me," because he was still spooked over these mysterious people trying to break into his house only a few nights earlier. So Aaron quickly went back to bed, and then Ellie went and grabbed a metal baseball bat that her father had put near the door for protection because of this recent break-in. It's like some weird sense of like irony, I think, in her head to use this item that he was using to protect himself to commit the murder against him. She gave it to her boyfriend Gavin, and then he beat her father to death while he slept. And all of this is happening while Ellie's 2 younger sisters are awake in the other room and they're listening to the entire thing. Gavin and Russell then took Aaron's body to his own trunk of his own car, and then all 3 of them left with $40 that they had stolen from Aaron's wallet. They then dumped Aaron's body in a nearby embankment and abandoned his car, and then just took off on foot and were walking around the neighborhood. A neighbor actually heard these chilling noises that were coming from next door and called a wellness check on her neighbor. First responders went to the home. They found Aaron and his oldest daughter Ellie missing, but there was a large pool of blood where Aaron usually slept. Within hours, they found Ellie, Gavin, and Russell just walking around the the neighborhood and brought them into custody, and shortly later they did find Aaron's body and his car. Now we're gonna get into the most bizarre, strangest police interrogations that have ever been conducted in true crime history. While being questioned, 15-year-old Ellie was extremely uncooperative. She denied even being Ellie. She said that she was an 18-year-old girl named Rain. She would refuse to speak, and when she did speak, it would just be lies.
Hi. Hello. Are you Ellie? No. What's your name? I have the right to your name.
And on the other hand, Russell was extremely cooperative. He would not stop yapping. He was very helpful, very friendly, and very normal with the detectives while he was speaking to them. But then when the detectives left the room, Russell's personality completely changed, and he became an almost cartoon villain.
Now here's the thing. I know the cops' twisted little pathetic rule game. And actually, sometimes I like to think that I invented the rule book. I'm not exactly bragging, but I use reverse psychology. You want to play hardball? I played baseball when I was younger. I wouldn't go there. And I know everything that I'm saying is being recorded, and I'm doing it on purpose. I can easily turn the speaker off and rant, and then you guys will come in thinking I'm a loony because you don't hear me. You do know I know you're listening, right? So listen here. Ellie Fryer is my client, my protectee. I would like to see her. Asking. Being polite. I know you're looking directly at me, aren't you? The information I gave is not worth $6. It's worth a lot more. So, we can do this the nice way and we negotiate, or we can do it the hard way and I can release my bipolar. Let's make a deal. 1, that's for the food. 2, I see Ellie and Gavin because they are both under my protection. 3, before you release Ellie to her parents, or parent, do a background check as well as a DNA test, as well as, well, not DNA, a drug test. And if you find out that her parent, her mom, is in fact doing drugs, you are to release her to me. Tell him to release Gavin and Ellie. Thank you. And I know I'm being recorded. You can keep that on there. Unless you're a nice cop, then I take it back. But if you're one of those two-timing, donut-eating piece of crap that don't like rules, a high school bully with a badge, I'm sorry, buddy, but I eat high school bullies for breakfast. I'm not demanding, I'm asking nicely. As a kind civilian that also knows how to manipulate cops.
Gavin was the only one to just skip the dramatics and make a full confession, but none of them would ever express any remorse for what they did to Ellie's father, Aaron. About 5 hours into Ellie's interrogation, she began to speak with the detectives, but she was using a baby voice. It was clearly a fake voice. She was also drawing pictures with crayons that the detectives gave her. I think she's trying to act like she's younger than she actually is. 15 is young, but she's acting like a 6-year-old. She was telling the investigators that her father was abusive and he deserved to die, but that her and her boyfriend were innocent, and she put all the blame on Russell. At one point, Ellie actually tried to negotiate with the investigators, make a little deal that if they let her and her boyfriend go off these murder charges, that she would tell them about minors that she knew that were smoking grass. Ultimately, Gavin did plead guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Ellie also pled guilty and was sentenced to 25 years with the chance of early release after 20 with good behavior. And Russell originally pled no contest and was sentenced to 15 years, but then later took a plea deal and pled guilty with the sentence of 7.5 years with a chance of parole after only 3. This case is incredibly controversial for so many reasons. We could talk about the complexities forever. For one thing, Russell, who got the lightest sentence, was the oldest person in this conspiracy. He was 22, the other people were 19 and 15. He received, the chance of parole after 3 years. It was his idea to commit this murder, and he had the largest hand in actually planning it. Then you have Gavin, who got the harshest sentence, and it was him who actually did commit the murder. But there's some people who say that he was manipulated because he was originally unwilling, and then, she lied about being pregnant, but I don't buy it at all. I think Gavin needs to be in prison 100%. And then when it comes to Ellie, people feel very differently. She was said to be extremely intelligent and gifted, and a lot of people believe that even at 15 years old, she was far more intelligent than her 2 adult male counterparts in this conspiracy, that she was the mastermind of the entire thing. While other people say that she was only a child, she was being, groomed by this predator. And they also do believe her accusations against her father with the abuse, and that she was so desperate to get away from her father that she lied about being pregnant, because she was that desperate to escape her father. The most notorious serial killer family, the Bloody Benders. This case is going to take us back all the way to the 1870s in Kansas. This is a case of the old Wild West. At this time in American history, colonizers were pushing out the indigenous people off their lands and then selling their land to white settlers for very, very, very cheap. Because of this, many people were leaving their old lives, some of which were actually escaping their old lives, to move to the Midwest, the old Wild West, including that of the Bender family. At the time, many people believed that our 2 older Benders, named John and Kate, that we're going to refer to as Ma and Pa, were the parents of the 2 younger Benders, also named John and Kate. But the 2 younger John and Kate were oddly close, leading to many rumors about their relation at the time. Many people believe actually that they were a couple posing as brother and sister. The Bender family bought multiple acres, they had a large property, and then they built a very small cabin on the property that they lived at. They also used this cabin to double as a small business, so they opened a bit of like a grocery store and also an inn. Bender Cabin was the only grocery store or inn for miles in any direction, so many of those people that were traveling to the Midwest to start new lives had to ultimately stop at the Bender Cabin for a nice meal and a place to sleep. All was fine until those travelers began to disappear. Now let's talk about the Benders a little bit again. So Ma and Pa were extremely intimidating. Pa was this big, burly man, and then Ma was a bit of an a-hole. She was seen as extremely rude to her customers, and people in the area referred to her as the she-devil. The younger John was nice, but he kind of gave people the creeps. The only Bender that people actually liked was the daughter Kate. She was said to be incredibly beautiful, overly friendly, a tad flirty, and she would use her charm to convince the travelers to stay at her family's inn. Kate was also said to be a psychic medium and would sell her abilities out of her family's inn. So many of these travelers that were stopping by the Bender family inn were traveling to start new lives across the country, so they were traveling with all of their life savings and then any of their belongings that had any worth. After being charmed by Kate Bender to stay the night at her family's inn, share a meal with her, or witness her psychic abilities, they would be, sitting with their back turned to a canvas board that would separate the inn part to the actual family's living quarters. And then while they're sitting there, chatting up this beautiful young girl, John and Pa would sneak up behind them and bash them over the head with hammers. They would be robbed of everything that they owned before being buried on the property or dumped somewhere else, including that of a father named George and his very young daughter, Marianne. The daughter, Marianne's age has been debated because honestly this story has become a bit of American folklore, but it is believed that she was about 7 years old. The father and daughter had plans of traveling through the Midwest and buying land in Iowa before they were never heard of again. They had a very close family friend named Dr. William York who was expecting a letter from his friend when him and his daughter got to Iowa, but that letter never came. So Dr. York went looking for his missing friend and then was also never seen again. But Dr. York had 2 brothers who were pretty well off in their neighborhood. They were wealthy men, and they put together a search party of over 50 men to go looking for their missing brother. They questioned every single person and every single house across the trail through the Midwest, and it seemed the last house that they were ever seen at was that of the Bender family. The Bender family were friendly and cooperative with the search party. They even told them that yes, Dr. York had stayed here overnight, but he had left in the morning, and they even blamed what happened to Dr. York as possibly being committed by the Native American people in the area. Kate Bender even offered to help the search party by using her psychic abilities to find out what happened to their brother for a fee, of course. The search party declined Kate Bender using her psychic abilities, and then they continued on in their search. Some time passed, and then the neighbors of the Bender family realized that they hadn't seen any members of the family in a long time. They checked their property, and the farm animals that they had on their land all looked extremely neglected, and they even found a baby cow passed away from dehydration. Inside of the Bender's cabin, all of their belongings were gone, and there was an overwhelming, terrible smell of death coming from a trap door that was hidden in the floor. When they went through the trap door, it took them to the cellar, and it was just absolutely covered in blood. They began digging on the property, and that's when they found nearly 20 bodies of the missing travelers, nearly half of which were never identified. And the Bender family was gone, never to be seen again. A large dead or alive bounty was put on the Bender family's heads, which led many vigilante groups to go hunting for the Benders, some of which said that they actually found the Benders and killed them, but they were never able to show their bodies, so this is probably a lie. And to this day, whatever happened to the Bender family when they escaped Kansas is one of the greatest mysteries of the Wild West. We know very little about who the Bender family really was, if their names were even John and Kate Bender, but I definitely am second guessing the people in my life with the last name Bender about their possible family lineage. Did this man kill his entire family because the haunted house he was living in made him do it? There's 2 families we're going to be talking about today, the Defoe family and the Lutz family, but we're going to start with the Defoes. On November 13th, 1974, their oldest son, 23-year-old Ronnie, ran into his local bar that was just down the street from his family's home, frantically screaming that he found both of his parents shot dead in the house. Tragically, it was not only Ronnie's parents that had been shot, his entire family was found dead in his home. His father, Ronald Sr., his mother, Louise, and then all 4 of his younger siblings, 18-year-old Dawn, 13-year-old Allison, 12-year-old Mark, and 9-year-old John, were all found lying face down in their beds and had all been shot. It appeared that they had all been shot in their sleep and that none of them woke up despite all of these loud shot noises, and that there was no sign of a struggle. And the very next day, Ronnie Defoe confessed to killing his entire family. He claims that he woke up randomly at 3:15 in the morning and that he had been hearing voices either plotting against him or telling him to hurt his family. And that once he started, he just couldn't stop, and that it all happened very fast. Apparently, Ronnie wasn't the only family member that had been experiencing something like this. Only 6 months before he was killed, the father, Ronald Sr., hired a priest to come to the home that specialized in exorcisms because he had a devil on his back. That's a direct quote. During Ronnie's trial, both him and his lawyer claimed that Ronnie had been driven mad by evil presences in the home and pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the jury did not buy the devil made me do it plea, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. And his former home on 112 Ocean Ave in Amityville, New York sat empty for over a year, actually 13 months to be exact, until the Lutz family moved in. George and Kathy Lutz and Kathy's 3 children all moved into the home in December 1975, and only 28 days later after moving in, they fled the home, never to return again, not even to get their belongings. George and Kathy were aware of the brutal crime that had been committed in the home when they bought it, but it was being insanely discounted, and also they really weren't the superstitious types. But a family friend was able to convince the Lutz family to have a priest come and bless the home because of that terrible crime that had been committed only a year earlier. Reportedly, the priest sensed a sinister presence in one of the upstairs bedrooms and warned the family to not allow anyone to sleep in that room. And the Lutz family almost immediately started to experience some really odd things after moving into the house. Just to tell you guys a few of these experiences, there would be terrible smells in the home with no explanation where the smells are coming from. Doors would slam shut. The glass of the windows would just smash. Swarms of flies would appear. Swarms of flies and different insects would appear in the home with no explanation, even though it was the dead of winter. The daughter befriended a spirit named Jody, and all the children began to sleep face down in their stomachs, which they had never done before, and this was the way that all of the Defoe family were found in their beds the day that they were killed. And all of the family members' personalities began to change almost immediately after moving into the home, but what was ever affecting the family was mainly targeting the father, George. He became incredibly aggressive. He would obsessively sit in front of the fireplace for hours because he was constantly cold. And George also says that he would randomly wake up at 3:15 in the morning every single night, the exact same time that Ronnie Defoe woke up to kill his entire family. And after only living in the house for 28 days, so less than a standard month, the Lutz family fled the home, never to return again, not even to get their belongings, including their brand new boat that they had just bought, and also George's custom motorcycles, which were apparently his prized possessions. And George and Kathy Lutz refused to ever speak about what happened that final night that they had in the house that forced them to flee, because it was just too scary to talk about. Many have speculated that whatever drove Ronnie Defoe to kill his entire family possessed George, and that's why they fled the home. This story quickly got a lot of attention, and a group of psychic researchers and paranormal investigators spent a lot of time in the home doing like a paranormal investigation, like immediately after the Lutz family left, including probably the 2 most famous paranormal investigators of all time, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Everyone on the research team has their own story about all the terrifying experiences that they had in the home, but all of them agreed that there was something evil in that home that had been there for a long time, even longer than before the Defoes had been killed in the home. And probably the most interesting thing that came from this investigation came from a camera that was set up to take a photo every 5 minutes. The camera was set up to take a photo of like the doorways where all the bedrooms were, where the Defoe family had been killed in their sleep. And one photo is particularly interesting. Out of 100 something photos, there's this one photo that appears to show a little boy hiding in the doorway. Extremely terrifying, and every member of that research team swore up and down that no children were brought along for this paranormal investigation. So this is a mystery who this little boy is. A lot of people think it resembles the youngest member of the Defoe family, 9-year-old John. Many successful books and upwards of 20 movies were all made about the Amityville horror, all marketing them as being based on a true story. This house is probably the most famous haunted house of all time, but what if I told you it might have all been a hoax? For one thing, many people have lived in the house after the Lutz family fled the home, and none of them have ever reported a single thing of paranormal activity. Also, parts of the home that the Lutz family claimed were destroyed by ghosts were perfectly intact when they moved in. Also, some parts of their story turned out to be proven just plain false and made up. Like they claimed on New Year's Day, they went outside to see hoof marks that had been made by a demon in the snow. Turns out there was no snow on the ground on that day in Amityville, New York. Also, years later, Ronnie Defoe's lawyer, William Weber, came out and said that the entire thing was a hoax, and he brainstormed the entire thing with the Lutz family because William Weber was planning on writing a book about it. In the Lutz's family defense, though, William Weber only ever met with the Lutz family after they already fled the home after living in it for 28 days, so it's not like this was planned beforehand. Also, William Weber only met up with the Lutz family because he wanted to write a book, but he planned to give some of the profits from the book to his client, Ronnie Defoe, that killed his entire family, and the Lutzes were not okay with that. So they actually ended up selling their story to a different author, and his book became incredibly successful. It sold millions of copies. They made a movie about it that had many sequels and also many spin-offs. So it's really possible that maybe William Weber only came out and said that the entire thing was a hoax because he was a little salty. George and Kathy Lutz even both passed polygraph tests. I know that's like not the biggest piece of evidence, but that matters to you. They also never changed their stories up until the day they died, other than admitting that some things were exaggerated for the book and the movie. But also, Ronnie Defoe, the man who killed his entire family in the Amityville house, has changed his story countless amounts of times about what happened that night and why it happened and who was involved, all the way up until the day he died just a couple years ago. This man locked his daughter in the basement for 24 years and forced her to have 7 of his children. It's one of the most notorious kidnappings in history and a crime that truly shocked the world. This man makes me feel ill. Josef Fritzl and his wife Rosemarie had 7 children, but Josef always had a very bizarre obsession with his one daughter Elizabeth and began essaying her when she was only 11 years old. Josef says that he chose Elizabeth because she was the daughter that most resembled his own mother. Like, yuck. His wife, Rosemarie, claims that she had no idea that this abuse was going on, but it is important to note that after they were married for about 10 years, Josef spent a year in prison for breaking into a woman's home and essaying her at knife point. So this woman definitely knew the man that she was married to. Elizabeth tried multiple times to escape her father's abuse by running away, but since she was a minor, she would always be brought back home by the police, no questions asked. So when Elizabeth turned 18, she was a legal adult now. She planned to move out. She had a job all lined up. She had all the plans set, but her father, Josef, could not allow this. It was shortly after Elizabeth turned 18, her father, Josef, asked her help bringing down a heavy door into their basement. For the past 6 years, Josef told his family that he was redoing the basement so he had a place to work, but what he was really doing was building a secret prison underneath the family home. And the door that he asked Elizabeth to help him bring down would be the door that she would be locked behind for 24 years. Elizabeth was locked down in the basement, no sunlight, no fresh air, nothing to do, no one to talk to. The only person she would see would be her father, Josef, her captor, when he would come downstairs to bring her small amounts of food and water and to essay her. Elizabeth's mother, Rosemarie, and the rest of the family are concerned about where Elizabeth went, so they went and reported her missing. So Josef forced Elizabeth to write a letter to the family saying that, she ran away, don't look for her. So her case was closed, but she was in the basement. She was in the basement and no one was looking for her. After 5 years of captivity, at the age of 23, Elizabeth gave birth to her first baby all alone, and this would be the first of 7 children she was forced to have with her own father. One of these babies was sadly born very, very sick. Elizabeth begged Josef to take the baby to the hospital, but he didn't because he thought it would blow his cover. So the baby sadly passed away after only being 3 days old, and then Josef put its body in the furnace. Josef did not think there was enough room in the basement for all these babies that Elizabeth was being forced to have, so Josef allowed Elizabeth to keep her 3 older children. But when she gave birth to the 3 younger children, Josef stole them from her, you guys, and then he would wrap them up, put them in a basket, and then put them on the front porch step for his wife Rosemarie to find. Then Josef and Rosemarie would raise these babies, and Josef would attach each baby with a little note from Elizabeth, their long-lost daughter, saying that she had this baby, but she was leaving it on the doorstep because she couldn't raise it. So Rosemarie was raising 3 of her grandchildren, but they were really the children of her daughter and her husband. And because Josef is such a sick individual, he would take photos of the 3 children that were allowed to live above ground, doing normal things like swimming in swimming pools, playing in the snow, having birthday parties, and then he would take those photos and show them to the children that were being forced to live underground that had never even seen sunlight in their entire lives, to show them what they were missing out on. And if you're wondering how Rosemarie or any of the rest of the family ever found that all these children and missing Elizabeth were living in the basement, well, for one, they were banned from going down there, but he also rigged it so in case anyone ever actually did go down there, they wouldn't find it. So you see there's the stair. These are the stairs from upstairs, downstairs, and this is a utility room, and this is where he would say he would work. And then this red door was hidden behind a bookcase, so no one would see that there was this huge prison where all these people were being held captive. So in 2008, after Elizabeth has been locked up underground for 24 years, she's in her 40s now. Remember, she got locked underground when she was 18. Her oldest child, 19-year-old Kirsten, got seriously sick. Kirsten seriously needed medical attention or she probably wasn't going to survive. So again, Elizabeth begged Joseph to take Kirsten to the hospital. But of course, at first he said absolutely not. But then he changed his mind because he probably realized that if she did die, what would he do with the body? Like, he couldn't just lift out a grown woman's body up the stairs of the basement and no one would see it. And then once he did do that, if he could do that, what would he do with it afterwards? So Joseph did bring her to the hospital. At the hospital, Kirsten was in terrible condition and the hospital was like really suspicious because there was no record of this person existing before she came into the hospital. She had white hair. Her skin was so pale, it was almost translucent. She was 19 years old, but honestly, guys, they were thinking this person was 40 years old because remember, she's never seen sunlight in her entire life. So the hospital actually contacts the police and the police go there. They're trying to talk to Joseph, but he's not giving anything up. He thinks he's really, really smart and he thought he had total control and was so smart, in fact, that he went and got Elizabeth, his daughter that he's had locked up for over 2 decades, and had her come out of the basement for the first time in 24 years to go talk to the police and clear everything up. So the police are now talking to Elizabeth, who also has white hair. She's in her 40s, but she looks 60. Like, everyone looked 20 years older than they were supposed to. Her skin is also pale as, you know, paper, and they're grilling Elizabeth, and she's not giving any answers either, but they're not taking no for an answer. They keep pushing her, and they're pushing Elizabeth until she broke down and finally confessed everything. The police, they go to the house, they find the cellar, they find the other children, and the interesting thing about this is the investigators that were in that cellar for, you know, not that long a time, they were just walking around it, finding these children. They were so traumatized by the sight of this like prison that these people were being held captive in that many of them needed therapy after. So just think about these grown men just in this cellar, this basement, this prison for a small amount of time needing therapy. Imagine how messed up everyone else was that was locked in there their entire lives pretty much. Elizabeth was 18 years old when she went down. She was in there for 24 years. She spent more time in that basement than she did out of the basement. Like, I'm 26 years old, being locked in the basement for 24 years, like, that's an entire lifetime for most of the people that are probably watching this video right now. So Joseph is obviously arrested, and at first he tried to deny everything. He said that his relationship with his daughter was consensual and that the children liked living in the cellar, but this obviously did not work, and eventually he did plead guilty on all charges and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. He has spent most of his sentence so far in a hospital for the criminally insane, but he was transferred to real prison very recently in May of 2024, where he is now eligible for parole, but I doubt he will get it. But let me know what you think. Elizabeth and her 6 children are living under new identities in a small village somewhere in Austria, and I really, really do hope the best for them. They're living completely out of the public eye. They don't do interviews. I think we should respect whatever wishes they had. I know a lot of people try to show up to that village trying to interview them. That's gross. Leave them alone. They all do need ongoing therapy, which is completely understandable. Also, Elizabeth, for a long time, held a lot of resentment against her mother, Rosemarie, which is also completely understandable. I'm really, really interested to hear from Rosemarie, though, if she ever does choose to do an interview, which I don't think she would, because I want to know what she thought when all this came to light and realizing that her missing daughter has been underground the entire time by the hands of her own husband. We do know that Elizabeth eventually did forgive her mother, and they apparently have a really, really strong, loving relationship, and I truly do hope the best for all of them. How this 15-year-old girl escaped a terrifying serial killer. 15-year-old Kara Robinson Chamberlain was in the front yard of her friend's home when a seemingly normal man got out of his car and approached her. That man was really 38-year-old serial killer Richard Avanis, who abducted 15-year-old Kara, put her in a storage bin that was in the backseat of his car, brought her to his home where he assaulted her for 18 hours. But Kara, at only 15 years old, started memorizing everything. From the serial number of the storage bin he transported her in, to the kind of cigarette he smoked. Even the name of his dentist and doctor that Kara saw on papers that were just laying around the apartment. Once Richard fell asleep, Kara was able to get herself out of the handcuffs that he put her in, remove herself from the leg restraints that he also put her in, and tiptoe out of the front door. Once outside, she ran towards the nearest car, who took her to the police station. Through the many details that Kara remembered, they were able to find Richard's apartment again, but by the time they got there, Richard had already fled. Strangely enough, Richard went to his sister's house and just started confessing everything to her. Before abducting Kara, Richard had abducted, essayed, and unalived at least 3 other young girls, the youngest only 12 years old. Richard's also suspected to be guilty of even more young girls' deaths, but unfortunately we might never know if he is responsible because Richard unalived himself before the police were able to take him into custody. All of this happening while Richard's wife and mother were together at Disneyland. I love sharing these stories of survival. It reminds me a lot of Jimmy Close and JC Lee Dugard, which we also covered on this channel. It also reminds me a lot of Elizabeth Smart, which we haven't covered yet. So if you guys would be interested in seeing the case of Elizabeth Smart and how she saved herself from a really scary dude, let me know in the comments. The goody church girl that unalived her entire family when she was only 16. The Cathy family was seen as wholesome, pure, big church family. We've got mom, dad, 2 little brothers, and then an only daughter named Erin who had just started her teenage years. Like I said, they were a big church family. Erin even sang in the church choir. She was homeschooled, really only hung out with church kids. But at the start of high school, Erin started public school. For the first time, she started hanging out with a new crowd and even got a new boyfriend. Erin was only 16 years old when she started dating 18-year-old bad boy named Charlie. Erin's parents did not like Charlie. They felt like he made a terrible first impression, but they still tried to get along with him for their daughter's sake. They invited him to a lot of family dinners. They invited him to church, but they still just felt like Charlie was obsessive and aggressive towards their teenage daughter. Erin's grades were slipping, her attitude was changing, so her parents just felt like it'd be better to sit their teenage daughter down and ask her to break up with her boyfriend. To their surprise, Erin agreed to break up with Charlie to their face. Because behind their backs, Erin ran to her boyfriend Charlie and 2 of her friends, another guy also named Charlie and his girlfriend Bobby, and told them that she wanted her parents dead. Erin was literally begging the 2 Charlies to not only unalive her parents, but her 2 little brothers as well, claiming that her parents abused her and that's why they all had to go. 16-year-old Erin instructed the 2 Charlies to break into her house while her entire family was sleeping. They went to her parents' room first and just started shooting, shot her dad, Terry, 11 times. And then they used a samurai sword on her mother, Penny. And they started searching for Erin's 2 little brothers. 13-year-old Matthew is looking at Charlie, who remember has been over to their house many times for dinner, and he's asking, he's begging, Charlie, why are you doing this? And Charlie said nothing. He just shot the little 13-year-old boy in the face. And then the 2 Charlies found 8-year-old Tyler hiding in his closet, absolutely terrified, and they used the samurai sword on him as well. And don't get me wrong, this entire situation is absolutely evil, but using a sword on an 8-year-old? The 2 Charlies then set the house on fire and left. But somehow Erin's father, Terry, despite being shot 11 times, was still alive. And he knew he had to live to tell everyone who just did this to his family. So he was able to crawl out of his burning house to his neighbor's home to tell him what just happened. The investigators start quickly arresting everyone that's involved. They found Erin at Charlie's house hiding. She tried to pretend that she was a victim and that they kidnapped her after they got done unaliving all their family, but they quickly found out that was not true. And everyone involved and her own text messages pointed her as the mastermind behind the entire thing. Both Charlies will spend the rest of their lives in prison. Bobby got 20 years for just being in the car, and Erin's gonna serve at least 40 years in prison. Surprisingly, to this day, Erin still has a relationship with her father, who still visits her in prison. He says he does not believe his teenage daughter was the mastermind, despite all evidence pointing that way, and says that he truly believes that his daughter was manipulated by Charlie, the evil 13-year-old that unalived his own baby sister. Charity was the single mom to 2 kids, her oldest being Paris, who was really creative, really helpful, really smart. He was actually confirmed to be a genius. Everyone truly believed that Paris loved his baby sister Ella, which is why they were all shocked with what Paris did next. Charity was working late, so she called a babysitter to watch 13-year-old Paris and 4-year-old Ella. But around 10 p.m., Paris was able to convince the babysitter to leave. That's when 13-year-old Paris essayed and brutally unalived his 4-year-old sister, Ella. Paris then called a friend from school and talked to them for about 6 minutes before he called 911. I couldn't even imagine being Charity in this situation, like finding out your one child is now gone forever, and your other child is being arrested for it. And it's not even like this was an accident. This was something that Paris had planned. Paris is a master manipulator. While in police custody, Paris was diagnosed with being both a psychopath and a narcissist. Paris had been wearing a mask his entire life. He literally laughed at his mother's face when she was crying, begging him, like, why did you do this? Something that his stories always change, like the motive behind it. But yeah, she's crying in front of him and he just goes, no one's ever known the real me. Paris has refused to be reevaluated, and he's also done like quite a few TV specials, TV appearances, where he claims that he actually does have empathy, he's not a psychopath, and he's a changed person. For years and years and years, until very recently, Paris and Ella's mom, Charity, would still visit Paris behind bars, support him, love him, because she hated what he did, but she still had unconditional love for her son Paris. Opinions have always been super split about her decision to still love and support her son, so let me know what you guys think about that. All experts that have looked at this case believe that Paris is unable to be rehabilitated, and when he is released, he's going to be a threat to society. And I said when Paris is released because due to juvenile laws in Texas, one day Paris will be released. Paris will be up for parole as early as 2027. But if Paris is never granted parole, he will be released in February of 2047. How this 11-year-old boy's disappearance was solved 27 years after he disappeared. Jacob Weatherling was like any other 11-year-old boy before his disappearance. His favorite color was blue. He loved sports, especially football, all things football. He loved watching football, playing football, collecting football cards. The day that Jacob disappeared, October 22nd, 1989, also was like any other normal day, but that night his parents had a dinner party at a friend's house about 20 minutes away, so Jacob was allowed to invite over his best friend Aaron to hang out with him, keep him company. Jacob also had a younger brother who was about 1 year younger than him and Aaron. His name was Trevor, so it was like the three boys all hanging out together. Around 9 p.m., the boys called their parents to see if they could ride their bikes to the video rental store. I'm sure you guys remember the days before Netflix where we had to beg our parents to take us to Blockbuster so we could like rent movies. Well, their mom said absolutely not. You're not riding your bikes alone at night. So the boys then asked to speak to their father. You remember like the old, if the one parent says no, ask the other one. Well, their father overruled the mother's decision, said yes, they could ride their bikes to the rental store as long as they were safe and brought a flashlight. It wasn't even a whole 45 minutes later, the parents got another phone call, but this time it was from their neighbor, frantically telling them they had to get home as soon as possible because something happened and Jacob was missing. Well, they immediately left to drive home, but it was about a 20-minute drive back to their house, and I could only imagine that was the most agonizing long 20 minutes of their life. By the time they got back to their house, the police were already there and they were questioning Trevor and Aaron about what happened to Jacob. The boys said that they were riding back from the video rental store when they were stopped by a man in a black mask who had a weapon. He told the boys to throw their bikes in a nearby ditch and then all lay down on their stomachs. Man then asked each boy how old they were. Trevor was 10 years old. The man decided that he did not want Trevor, so he told Trevor to run home. Run and don't look back or he would shoot him. Then he ordered Jacob and Aaron to both stand up and look at him. The boys were both 11 years old. They both had brown hair. They were about the same height. He wanted one boy, and it was a 50-50 chance, but he chose Jacob, and he sent Aaron running after Trevor. He told him, run home, don't look back, or I will shoot you. Aaron ran so fast that he caught up to Trevor. The boys ran another 100 yards, and then they decided to look back, but at that point, they did not see the man, and they did not see Jacob. Now, this story is crazy, and honestly, the police did not believe the boys' story at first. They thought that maybe something accidentally happened to Jacob, and the boys made up the story to cover it up because they were afraid of getting in trouble. So tragically, because the police did not believe the boys' story right away, they did not start looking for Jacob right away, which is the worst thing possible when you have a missing child. But once they did start looking for Jacob, this case was huge. Everybody knew Jacob Weatherling's name. They got thousands of tips, but the case still went cold and it went unsolved for 27 years. 27 years where the parents had no idea what happened to their 11-year-old son. But even as years went by and then decades went by, the investigators could still not let Jacob's disappearance go, and they actually uncovered that only a few months before Jacob disappeared, another boy was kidnapped. His name was Jared, and he was only 1 year older than Jacob, and the two stories were so similar that they had to have been committed by the same person. The man who kidnapped the other boy, Jared, took him from a similar area that Jacob disappeared. He took him into his car where he essayed him, and then afterwards he let Jared go. He told him to run home, don't look back or I will shoot you. It's the exact same story that Trevor and Aaron told the police the day that Jacob disappeared. There was DNA uncovered on Jared's shirt, but they could not match it to anyone for 26 years when they finally got a DNA match, and it belonged to a man named Danny Heinrich. Danny Heinrich was 26 years old back in 1989 when Jacob and Jared both disappeared. He was even questioned when Jacob Wetherling disappeared, but they didn't have any evidence against him. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations for the kidnap and essay of Jared had already passed, so Jared would not get any justice, but they were hoping that they could link Danny Heinrich to Jacob Wetherling. So they searched Danny's house to try and get something on him, and they found a mountain of something. They found so much child essay photos and videos, and they actually charged him with 25 counts of having this material in his possession. And then the police offered Danny Heinrich probably one of the most controversial plea deals in true crime history. I can't even lie or sugarcoat it, you guys are gonna be extremely pissed off. They told Danny that if he made a full confession about what happened to Jacob and also showed them where he put Jacob's body, they would not charge him with killing 11-year-old Jacob Wetherling, and instead of charging him with having 25 counts of child essay photos and videos, they would only charge him with 1 count. So that's what piece of shit Danny Heinrich did, and after 27 years, Jacob Wetherling's body was finally found. I can't even to begin the emotions that Jacob Wetherling's family had. I don't even think there's a word for it. Like, bittersweet does not even cut it. On one hand, they finally have answers about what happened to their son, but now they know for 100% certain that Jacob will never be coming back. The night that Jacob disappeared, Danny said that he saw the boys riding to the video store, so he hid and waited for them to be coming back. When he kidnapped Jacob, he handcuffed him in his car where he did essay him, and Jacob was asking him, what did I do wrong? Danny said that he planned to let Jacob go like he did all the other boys, but he saw a police car drive by. This was completely unrelated because remember at first the police were not searching for Jacob because they thought that the boy's story was a lie, but it scared Danny, he panicked, and he shot Jacob. Due to the plea deal, Danny Heinrich essentially got away with murdering 11-year-old Jacob Wetherling. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with a chance of early release if he has good behavior. The case that we're going to be discussing today has been widely known on the internet as the Henrietta Sleepover Massacre, where at a sleepover in Oklahoma, 5 children and a mother were all killed. This case is so very heartbreaking and frustrating, and you guys are going to be so very angry when you hear the details of it, but I do have a way that you guys can help by signing a petition in my bio if you just stick around to the end. In 2003, Jesse McFadden attacked a 16-year-old girl named Crystal. He essayed her while he held a sharp weapon up to her neck. For this crime, Jesse was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and in 2016, he reoffended while behind bars. Somehow, while Jesse was in prison, he was able to get a cell phone, and when he was caught with this cell phone, they found that he had been communicating with another 16-year-old girl named Caitlin in a very graphic and explicit manner. For this crime, Jesse was being charged with soliciting a minor and also being in possession of CP, charges that could land Jesse another 20 years in prison. But his trial was being delayed multiple times. And for whatever reason, despite clearly showing that Jesse had not rehabilitated in prison, continued to reoffend while he was behind bars, and had also not even yet gone to trial for that additional crime he committed while he was in prison against another child, Jesse McFadden was released early. He was released 3 years early in October of 2020. And when Jesse McFadden was released, he was not on probation. He was out living free. Although he was now a registered SA offender, his community was not made aware when he moved in that a dangerous man was now living in their neighborhood. In 2022, Jesse McFadden became the stepfather to 3 teenagers, including 2 teenage girls, when he married Holly Guess. Holly's children were 17-year-old Riley Allen, 15-year-old Michael Mayo, and 13-year-old Tiffany Guess. All 3 children had different biological fathers, but all of them referred to Tiffany's father, Joe, as their dad, since he pretty much raised all of them. He had been in Riley's life since she was 1 and had been in Michael's life his entire life, and even planned on adopting Riley and Michael even after he divorced their mother, Holly. As far as I know, Joe and Holly, despite now being divorced, were civil, and they had an agreement that if they were going to bring anyone into their children's lives, that person had to first be vetted by a background check. And Holly told her ex-husband Joe her new husband Jesse McFadden's background check came up clean, even though we know that that's a lie. Holly's mother, the grandmother of Riley, Michael, and Tiffany, has come out and said that her daughter was aware that Jesse McFadden's background check did not come up clean, but that he had hired an actress, allegedly hired an actress to play as his victim and talk to her daughter Holly and say that the entire thing was a misunderstanding and that her daughter Holly had been fooled by Jesse. Regardless, and I don't want to seem like I'm victim blaming here at all, these are just the facts. Holly did lie to the father of her children that Jesse's background check came clean, and she even allowed the children of other parents to come over and stay the night at her house without telling them about her husband's criminal background. Which brings us to the weekend of April 28th, 2023. 13-year-old Tiffany invited her two best friends, 14-year-old Ivy Webster and 15-year-old Brittany Brewer, to come and sleep over at her house for the weekend. This was not an uncommon thing. The girls had stayed over at Tiffany's house before. The only thing different about this weekend was that Tiffany's stepfather, Jesse McFadden's trial from the crimes he committed in prison in 2016 was supposed to be starting that following Monday on May 1st, 2023, a court date he did not plan on attending. When Ivy and Brittany never came home Sunday evening like they were supposed to from the sleepover and their parents could no longer get a hold of them, the girls were both reported missing by their families. The situation even got more terrifying when Jesse McFadden never showed up for his court date the following day. And by 3 p.m. on May 1st, the authorities had gotten a search warrant for the house, and on the property they found 7 dead bodies, including that of Jesse McFadden. Jesse had killed his wife Holly, her 3 children Riley, Michael, and Tiffany's 2 best friends Ivy and Brittany before he unalived himself. The investigators really dropped the ball on this investigation. Only after a couple days, the family members were allowed to walk through the home where their children had been killed. Not only did the family members find evidence that the investigators had missed, but they were left to see this terrible scene of what their children's final moments were like. In the home were several beds and other pieces of furniture that had restraints, chains, and padlocks attached to them. There were graphic adult toys and also hard substances in various rooms. We do know that Ivy and Brittany were both SA'd, and it does appear that everyone in the house was tortured. For how long, we do not know. And it was proven that some of those items, including the padlocks, had been purchased by Jesse just a few days prior to this mass murder, proving that this was something that he had planned. And also Joe, Tiffany's father, and the man that also raised Riley and Michael, found out that all of his children were dead via a Facebook post. The authorities could not even bother to have given him a call. The way that the justice system handled a criminal like Jesse McFadden is appalling. It's the most catastrophic failure that I've read about in a very long time. Ivy Webster's mother, Ashley, is very active on this app. I do have her tagged below. If you guys want to go over there and show her some love and support, I think she would really, really appreciate that. She is actively trying to spread her daughter's story, as well as trying to spread awareness to other families and other young girls that there are men like Jesse McFadden out there. Ivy's family also have a petition, which I talked about a little bit in the beginning of my video. With this petition, they're trying to have a law passed that they called Knight's Law. This was named after the mascot at the school district that all the 5 children attended. With this law, they are trying to have stricter laws and stricter sentences against predators that commit crimes against children, as well as getting more education to law enforcement officers, educators, and welfare agents. I strongly encourage all of you guys to click the link in my bio. You'll see it right there at the top and sign that petition. I wholeheartedly support Ivy's family and what they're trying to do, and also wholeheartedly support Knight's Law. So thank you so much in advance for signing that petition. Before all of their lives were stolen, Holly's mother describes her daughter as a beautiful woman who truly did love her children. Riley was described as an extremely artistic and creative girl with dreams of being an artist or a doctor one day. Michael was described as being very athletic. He also really enjoyed video games like most teenage boys do, and he also had an interest in engineering. Tiffany was said to be extremely smart and sweet, and she loved cross-country and choir. Brittany was an extremely outgoing girl. She never knew a stranger, and she had dreams of being a teacher when she grew up. And Ivy's mother, who I got to speak to today, described her daughter Ivy as being incredibly sweet. She loved animals of all kinds, and she wanted to work with animals one day. She loved to play softball, she loved to watch horror movies, and she really could not wait to one day travel the world. A lot of people don't know this, but there are free websites and free services that will show you every single SA offender in your area. This is something that every parent needs to know. Like familywatchdog.us, they will show you every offender. They'll show you their name, their photo, what they did, and they categorize it. All of the red dots are people that committed crimes against children. You can also sign up for free notifications that will show you when offenders move and move out of your area. Everyone failed this 5-year-old girl, and this case is sure to make your blood boil. Both of Harmony Montgomery's parents struggled with addiction and broke up before she was born. Her mother, Crystal, had full custody of her because her father, Adam, was in prison. And when Harmony was 2 months old, she was removed from Crystal's custody for the first time. Harmony would be removed and removed from her mother's custody 3 times before her father, Adam, was given full custody following his 2015 release from prison, where he was convicted in shooting a man in the head during a substance deal. Adam actually had an extensive violent history, but this judge still thought it would be a good idea for Harmony to live with Adam and his wife, Kayla. Multiple calls and multiple home checks were done of the Montgomery home, including a January 2020 home check where Harmony could not be found. And Adam explained it away, saying that Harmony had been living with her mother, Crystal, since Thanksgiving. 2 weeks later, someone did leave a voicemail on Crystal's phone to try and confirm if Harmony was living with her. They never received a call back and never followed up. At the end of 2021, an acquaintance of Harmony's mother, Crystal, called police and said that no one had seen Harmony since 2019. Shortly after that, that's when Crystal finally told police that she hadn't seen or spoken to her daughter in over 2.5 years. I hope you guys are still sticking with me because I know this case has a complicated timeline. Because this entire case is just filled with people failing this beautiful little girl, the police did not start searching for Harmony until 5 weeks later. Well, of course, Adam didn't have an explanation why no one had seen Harmony in 2.5 years, so Adam and Harmony's stepmother, Kayla, were arrested. Kayla did ultimately end up telling police that Adam had killed Harmony on December 7th, 2019, while the family was homeless and living in their car. Adam repeatedly hit 5-year-old Harmony until she stopped breathing because she was having trouble potty training, and it made him angry. Because I'm sure neither of her neglected ass parents helped properly potty train her. Last month, Adam was found guilty but won't be sentenced until May. And probably one of the most sad parts of this incredibly sad case is Harmony's body still has yet to be found, so she has not been able to be properly put to rest. Of course, I don't know, but I think maybe before they actually sentence Adam, they might try and do a plea deal to try and find Harmony's remains. Today, we're going to be going over the well-known case of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. Although technically solved, many people that know the case and know the case well are very skeptical. Is this case really solved? So we're going to be going over the case, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about 3 suspects that I believe are most likely to be responsible, including that of notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. It was around noon on July 27th, 1981. Adam and his mother visited the mall in Hollywood, Florida, so his mom could purchase a lamp that she had been eyeing up for months. The mall was really busy that day. Adam's mom actually had trouble even finding a parking spot. The mother and son entered the mall through the Sears entrance, and as soon as they entered the store, 6-year-old Adam's eyes locked on the toy section. There was a video game display and a bunch of older boys playing an Atari, which for my younger audience is like the PlayStation Xbox of that time. Adam's mom allowed her son to play the video game with the older boys, and she was only gone for about 10 minutes before returning to the toy section to not only find her son Adam missing, but every boy that was just there minutes earlier playing video games were all gone. You know, I have a lot of parents that follow me, and you know that feeling when you don't see your kid even just for a second. Adam's mom is looking through every single aisle in Sears. She's checking every inch of the busy mall. She has a Sears employee call over the intercom for Adam not once but twice. But there was no sign of her son. Adam had vanished from a busy mall in broad daylight, so 6-year-old Adam was reported missing. Turns out, just moments after Adam's mom left her son to play video games with these older boys, the older boys broke out in a fight about whose turn it was to play next. So a Sears employee saw that they're causing this disturbance and kind of kicked all the boys out of the mall. So the employee led all of the boys, including Adam, out of the mall, out of an entrance that was different than the one that Adam and his mom had entered through. The employee asked all the children if their parents were in the store. All the older boys said no, but Adam, who was very shy and very quiet and probably scared and confused, he thinks he's getting in trouble, didn't say anything. I can only hope that the employee thought that Adam was like the younger sibling of one of the older boys and didn't just leave a 6-year-old outside the mall alone, but now he was. All the older boys, they left, took off on foot or their bikes, and now 6-year-old Adam was left alone outside of the mall. Multiple witnesses claim to have all seen the same man creepily hanging around the toy section, including the area where the boys were playing video games shortly before Adam disappeared. And an entire different set of witnesses described the same man dangerously speeding out of the mall parking lot in a blue van shortly after Adam would have vanished. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our first suspect of the day, and that would be very close family friend Jimmy Campbell. Adam's parents and Jimmy were like family for years. They were close family friends years before Adam was ever even born. He even lived with the family for a while and even slept in Adam's bedroom for a little bit. But Jimmy and Adam's dad had had a recent falling out, and Jimmy had moved out of the home recently before Adam disappeared. Jimmy was also the only person that knew that Adam and his mom were going to be at that Sears at that time on that day. Jimmy was questioned many times, and it was during one of those times that he admitted that him and Adam's mother were having a years-long affair, that they were in love, and Jimmy wanted her to leave her husband for him, but that she said that she couldn't leave her husband because a custody battle will be too messy and too hard on her son Adam, and maybe that they could be together when Adam's older and out of the house. Seems like a motive to me. And while being questioned, even though Adam had only been missing for a few days, Jimmy kept referring to Adam in the past tense, which is never a good sign. Also, Adam has always been described as being this incredibly shy child who was kind of afraid of strangers and would not easily go off with someone he did not know. Jimmy was someone he knew and knew well, someone he wouldn't be afraid of. And to cast even more suspicion on Jimmy, he was actually the coach of Adam's t-ball team. So they questioned all of the teammates, and one boy named Tony actually accused his coach Jimmy of SAing him. So they questioned Jimmy about this, but they don't say like the name of the boy that accused him. They just say something like, one of the kids you coach say that you did something to them. And Jimmy just immediately goes, Tony's lying. Is he? Jimmy was ruled out as a possible person of interest after passing a polygraph test. And then 2 weeks after Adam disappeared, a grisly discovery was made by 2 fishermen at a canal. What the men first believed was possibly the head of like a baby doll turned out to be the head of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. Since this is a child, I don't want to get too graphic, but I will say that during the autopsy, it was clear that this was not done by like an alligator. And to this day, the rest of Adam's remains have never been uncovered. After the tragic discovery, 2 men came out and said that before they found Adam's head, they had seen a man with a blue van, if you remember, throwing something into that canal. At this point, Adam's story was very well known across the entire nation and everyone was heartbroken. 2 years later, a made-for-TV movie about Adam's story debuted on TV, and the very next day, convicted serial killer Otis Toole made a jailhouse confession that he was the one responsible. Which brings us to our second suspect of the day. So Otis claimed that him and his partner in crime plus lover, Henry Lucas, had been the ones to kidnap and kill Adam. Otis and Henry had been on a crime spree across the entire nation before both being incarcerated. They are both known as the confession killers because between the 2 of them, they have both confessed or falsely confessed to a total of 1,000 murders. So when Otis confessed the day after a movie about Adam debuted on TV, they were very skeptical. And then they were even more skeptical when they found out that the man that Otis said that he kidnapped and killed Adam with was actually behind bars the day that Adam disappeared. So Otis changed his story for the first time, said that he alone lured Adam away into his car with the promise of candy. And as a shy child who was terrified of strangers, like Adam has always been described, I do not buy that because I was an outgoing child and I would have been very scared of that man and I would not have gone with him for any reason. He's scary looking. I mean, look at him. Otis then recanted his confessions that he just did it just because he wanted attention. He then confessed again, he changed his story, he recanted that confession, changed his story, confessed again, and he did this dozens of times. It was like a game to him. One day, Otis confessed to being the one that did this to Adam. He then recanted that confession, only to confess again, all within 12 minutes. There has been circumstantial evidence that maybe Otis is telling the truth, but never anything concrete, never DNA evidence or anything like that. They did find a pair of little shorts, like little boys' shorts at Otis's mother's house that were like the ones that Adam was wearing that day, but that was like the only thing like semi-concrete. Otis did know some details about the case that were not released to the public, only for it to later come out that he heard those details from another investigator. There was never enough evidence to arrest and convict Otis, and in 1995, he passed away in prison from liver disease, leaving behind one more deathbed confession that he was the one responsible for killing Adam Walsh. And then in 2008, Adam's case was officially closed, listing Otis as being the one responsible, which has been very controversial because if you have no evidence to arrest him and convict him of the crime, how do you have enough evidence to close the case? Now let's discuss our final suspect of the day, and that would be notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. When Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested in 1991, he confessed to killing 17 boys and men between the years of 1978 and 1991, and remember, Adam disappeared in 1981, so like right there in the middle. At the time that Adam was kidnapped, Jeffrey Dahmer was living in the same area. He actually only worked about a 15 to 20 minute drive away from the mall that Adam disappeared from. Jeffrey Dahmer also had access to a work van from his job that was, you guessed it, blue. It was a blue van. And when he was arrested in 1991 and then his face was plastered on every TV across the country, seven separate people called and said that he was the man that they saw at the mall hanging around the toy section where the kids were playing video games, and he was the one driving the blue van that was speeding away after Adam disappeared. But Jeffrey Dahmer always adamantly denied being the one responsible. He even said, like, I've confessed to every crime I've ever committed, crimes that you guys didn't even know about, I told you about, so why would I not confess to this? But in a later interview, Jeffrey Dahmer said if I admitted to it, I would be killed in prison for being a PDF file. And the person interviewing him said that he felt like that was his way of saying that he did it. But it is important to note that Adam Walsh's parents do accept what the Hollywood Police Department say, and that Otis was the one that did that to their son. Adam Walsh's parents have also done a lot of good after experiencing the most tragic thing that anyone could ever experience ever, losing a child in that brutal way. They have set up so many things that have changed the way that missing children's cases are handled. They have changed laws. They even co-founded the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, which is really, really cool. Adam's father, John Walsh, also went on to famously host the TV show America's Most Wanted, which I know every single one of you guys have heard about. And that show also did a lot of good, putting away hundreds of bad people. Did Scott Peterson kill his pregnant wife, Laci Peterson? This is a very well-known case. It's very controversial as well. There's a lot of people that think Scott Peterson is innocent or Scott Peterson is guilty. It's been getting a lot of attention again because Netflix just put out a new docuseries. Peacock has a documentary coming out tomorrow, I'm pretty sure. You guys have been asking me nonstop for my thoughts lately, so we are jumping right in. Scott and Laci Peterson were really like that couple. I know you know the type. They're the perfect couple. Scott was a handsome all-American golden boy. Laci was an absolutely gorgeous cheerleader in high school with like the most beautiful smile ever. Like immediately after meeting Scott, Laci told her mom that she met the man that she was going to marry. The entire thing seemed like a fairy tale. After Laci and Scott got married, they tried to have a baby for like 3 years with no luck. They were considering fertility treatments or adoption, but in 2002, they finally conceived. And by December, Laci Peterson was 8 months pregnant with their son Connor when she mysteriously disappeared on Christmas Eve. Scott's story was early that morning on Christmas Eve, him and his wife Laci sat down to watch a little bit of her favorite TV show, Martha Stewart. Laci had plans to go shopping that day, to do some cleaning, to bake cookies, and take their dog for a walk. And Scott says early that morning he left to go golfing alone. And I know we're all thinking it, leaving your very pregnant wife on Christmas Eve to go golfing alone is a little strange, but let's keep going. So Scott told his wife that he was going golfing that day, but after he left, he decided it was a little too cold to go golfing, so he decided to take his brand new boat out fishing. again, alone. A few of their neighbors claim that they saw Lacey walking their dog that morning. That fits with Scott's story. But then around 10 a.m., a neighbor just sees their dog walking around alone, but he still has his leash on. I guess she did not think that was weird at all because she just put the dog back in Lacey and Scott's backyard. When Scott got home from fishing, he found the dog in the backyard with its leash still on. Lacey's car was at the house. All of her belongings were at the house, but Lacey was not at the house. So Scott called Lacey's mom to see if Lacey was there. When she wasn't there, Scott told Lacey's mom that, his wife and her daughter are missing, so Lacey Peterson was reported missing. There were no signs that a crime had been committed in their home. There was no evidence. There's no signs of a struggle. But Scott was really rubbing people the wrong way. He was acting really, really weird. He seemed to have no emotion or care at all about his very pregnant wife. But Lacey's family were still in support of Scott at this time, but the media and public were not. Lacey's disappearance was making headlines nationally. Everyone knew about this case. Everyone wanted to get Scott in front of the cameras, but Scott did not want to be in front of any cameras because he was hiding a very big secret. Scott had been cheating on Lacey. Scott was having an affair with a woman named Amber Fry, and that woman, Amber Fry, had no idea her boyfriend had a wife until her boyfriend's wife was reported missing. Put yourself into Amber's shoes for 1 second, okay? You're watching TV and you see on the TV that a pregnant woman has gone missing and her husband is being considered as a suspect, and that man is your boyfriend. I mean, it's absolutely insane, but Amber did the right thing. She immediately calls the police, and Amber had a lot to say. Turns out 5 weeks before Lacey disappeared, Scott told Amber that he had been previously married, but he had recently lost his wife, and this would be his first holiday without his wife. I mean, this man is either extremely guilty or a psychic, right? The exact same day that Scott told Amber that his wife was dead, Scott bought that brand new boat, like he had been maybe planning something. So Amber allowed the police to secretly record her and Scott's phone calls, and then she just played along with Scott like nothing was wrong. So 8 days after Lacey disappeared, they held a candlelight vigil for her and her baby, Connor. And guess what Scott was doing during that candlelight vigil? In the middle of the vigil for his missing pregnant wife, Scott is calling his mistress Amber in the middle of the vigil, talking about how excited he is for their future together. And on what would have been Connor's due date, they had another candlelight vigil for him, and Scott didn't show up. Guess where he was? He was out buying a birthday present for Amber because the same day was her birthday and he was trying to see his mistress. And when Scott's affair with Amber got leaked to the public, they were even more against Scott, and even Lacey's family turned against Scott at this point. There were no signs of Lacey or Connor for months. They did so many searches until April 13th. Tragically, the remains of a little baby boy that were Connor washed up on the shore of the San Francisco Bay, and the very next day, parts of Lacey Peterson's remains washed up on shore as well. And this was the exact same area that Scott says he took out his boat fishing the day that Lacey disappeared. And only 4 days later, Scott was arrested for the murder of his wife and unborn child. And guess where Scott was when he got arrested? Only 4 days later, after his wife and his son's bodies were found, Scott was at the golf course. A golf course in San Diego near the Mexico border. And when Scott was arrested, he had a bunch of camping equipment in his car. He also had $15,000 cash in his car, as well as 4 cell phones and his brother's ID. He also had grown out facial hair, which he previously did not have. He had also bleached his hair. He was looking pretty much unrecognizable, and a lot of people think that when he was arrested, he was actually planning on crossing the Mexico border and fleeing the country. And Scott Peterson was found guilty for the deaths of Lacey and Connor, and he was sentenced to death row with no physical evidence that actually linked him to the crime. I mean, there was no blood in the house, there was no blood on his boat. They really only had circumstantial evidence that convicted him, which is why this case is so controversial and still debated to this day over 20 years later. And if I tried to tell you every single piece of evidence that makes Scott look guilty or everything that could suggest that maybe he's innocent, we would really be here talking all day long. What we do know is that Scott told his mistress that his wife was dead 5 weeks before she died, and that exact same day he bought a brand new boat that he did not tell anyone he bought, which a lot of people think he used to get rid of Lacey's body. and the same area that he says he was the day that she disappeared was where her and her unborn baby's body were later found. And right before Lacey disappeared, Scott made 5 homemade anchors for his boat with concrete, and after Lacey disappeared, 4 were missing. A lot of people think that he used those anchors to try and hold Lacey's body down, and he was never expecting her to be found. There are a very, very small amount of details that could suggest that maybe Scott is innocent, but none of them outweigh the things from me that show that he is guilty. In 2020, so just a few years ago, Scott Peterson's sentence was changed from death row to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and to this day, he maintains his innocence. And in 2022, the Innocence Project of LA took on Scott's case because they believe that he is innocent and that they have evidence that could prove that he is innocent and was wrongly convicted. At one point, this girl was the youngest woman on death row. This is a case of one of the messiest love triangles I've ever heard of, and it feels like something out of a TV show. This is Amelia Carr from Florida. She had a really, really rough childhood. Her father and her grandfather both began to essay her when she was only 4 years old. And when the authorities were made aware of this, her father, not her grandfather, only her father, was given a court-ordered program to fix him, no jail time, and then was right back in the home where the abuse continued. It only ever ended when Amelia was 15 years old, so over 10 years of suffering through this abuse, when she told someone at the school what was happening at home. So her father was arrested and placed in jail, and behind bars, her father tried to hire a hitman to kill his own daughter because she turned him in. But that hitman was actually a undercover police officer. And for all of this, the over 10 years of essaying his own daughter and then trying to hire a hitman against her, he was only given 4 years in prison. Amelia had a lot of trauma and complex emotions after this. There was shame, there was guilt. She was always this really brilliant child. She had an extremely high IQ. She was an honor roll student, but she dropped out of high school. She ran away from home. She got pregnant with her first child when she was only 17 years old. And then by the time she was 21 years old, she was a single mother of 3 children. And now this is where that messy love triangle I told you about comes into play. So Amelia was in an on-again, off-again relationship with her youngest child's father, a guy named Jamie, and Jamie had a new best friend, a guy who had just moved to Florida named Josh. Josh had just moved to Florida with his long-term girlfriend, his high school sweetheart named Heather. Josh and Heather had a child together. The relationship was really good. They were like this little family until Josh got addicted to a substance called crystal. You know, crystal. His personality completely changed, so they moved to Florida for a fresh new start, but shortly after they moved to Florida, Heather got pregnant again. Well, Josh was not happy about this, so he actually started cheating on his pregnant girlfriend with his best friend Jamie's girlfriend, Amelia. You see how this starts to get messy? It gets worse. Well, Heather found out that Josh was cheating on her with Amelia, and so began this terrible cycle where Josh and Heather would break up, so he would go be with Amelia, and then he would leave Amelia to go back to Heather, and then Heather and Josh would break up again, so he would go date Amelia, he would leave her to be with Heather, and so on and so forth, and this would continue for over 2 years. Allegedly, at one point, they were even in a throuple. Well, at some point, Heather has enough of this headache, so she dumps Josh. She starts dating a new guy. He's a good guy. She's in a healthy, stable relationship for once, but Josh cannot let her go. Josh begins stalking Heather. He's threatening her and her new boyfriend, but the entire time that Josh is harassing his ex-girlfriend Heather, he's dating Amelia. He even gets Amelia pregnant and proposes to her. So they're fiancés, but he's still stalking and harassing his ex-girlfriend Heather. And because toxic relationships can be so difficult to break out of, Heather decides that she wants Josh back. So Josh leaves Amelia, the woman that he's just proposed to, who was pregnant with his child, to get back together with Heather. And within a few days, he proposes to Heather with the same ring that he used to propose to Amelia. And within 1 month, Josh and Heather were married. But it was not happily ever after for Josh and Heather now. Oh, no, because only 10 days into their marriage, Josh and Heather got into a fight, and Josh threatened to kill Heather, which landed him in jail. And within a few days of Josh going to jail, Heather had a new boyfriend, and I bet you'll never guess who it is. It was Jamie. You remember Jamie? It was Josh's best friend and Amelia's baby daddy. And with Josh behind bars, Amelia starts visiting him and they rekindle their relationship. And Amelia is so mad at Heather for 1, sending Josh to prison, and 2, because Heather was dating her ex-boyfriend. I wonder if Amelia even saw the irony in that. So not only is Amelia threatening Heather to drop the charges against Josh, but she also starts going around town offering anyone $500 to kill Heather. Like father, like daughter, right? Because as you remember, Amelia's father tried to hire somebody to kill her. Well, Amelia scared Heather, so much in fact that Heather dropped the charges against Josh and Josh was released from jail. And within 9 days of Josh being released from jail, Heather Strong went missing. Well, the police, they question Amelia and they question Josh and they question them separately. And Josh actually cracks. He tells them that he lured Heather to meet him, but Amelia was secretly there. The two of them attacked Heather. They tied her to a chair where they forced her to sign over custody of their children to him. And then with duct tape over Heather's mouth, Amelia calmly just walks over to her and holds her nose so she couldn't breathe. That's so sinister. And she did it so calmly, and that's just such a twisted way to end somebody's life. And Amelia killed Heather while she's still pregnant with Josh's child, because this is how fast all of this happened. Amelia wasn't as easy to crack as Josh because, as you remember, Amelia has an extremely high IQ. She's a lot smarter than Josh. She does not fall for like the interrogation tactics that they do. So they actually only got a confession out of Amelia because they secretly recorded a conversation that she was having with one of her friends. While awaiting her trial, Amelia gave birth to her and Josh's child, which was put up for adoption, and then her 3 other children and Heather and Josh's 2 children were put into the foster system. And it actually is so sad and breaks my heart how many children were in the middle of this terrible mess. Amelia and Josh had 2 separate trials, and Amelia was found guilty and sentenced to death row, and Josh was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for essentially the same crime, which has been very controversial, but you guys are gonna have to let me know what you think about that. To this day, Amelia continues to claim that she is actually 100% innocent and this was all Josh. And in 2017, her sentence was actually switched to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This case was absolutely crazy, and I have a lot I want to say at the end here. For one, I hope I don't see any comments of people victim blaming Heather because she continued to stay with Josh and go back to him. As someone that was in a toxic relationship for a really, really long time, I know how hard it is to like finally get out of it. And I'm sure a lot of people watching it can sympathize and empathize with Heather in this situation. If you or someone you know are in a toxic relationship and you are scared, just know that you are not alone and there are a lot of resources out there that can help you. Heather Strong is not responsible for what happened to her. It is not her fault. There's only 2 people that are to blame to what happened to Heather, and they are exactly where they need to be. Have you guys ever heard of Ethan Couch, the teenager that killed 4 people but got away with it because it was determined that he was just too rich to go to jail? It was June 15th, 2013, the day before Father's Day. 24-year-old Brianna Mitchell's car broke down on the side of the road right in front of the home of Eric and Holly Boyles. Their 21-year-old daughter Shelby was also at her parents' house. It was summer break, so she was there visiting them, especially since the next day was Father's Day. So all 3 of them came outside of their house to help Brianna with her broken down vehicle. And at the same time, youth pastor Brian Jennings was also driving down the same road, and he also pulled over to help. These were just good Samaritans just trying to help out a 24-year-old girl whose SUV had broken down when Ethan Couch came barreling down the road. So who is Ethan Couch? Ethan Couch is a spoiled, wealthy, entitled 16-year-old boy who had little to no parental supervision. That evening, Ethan and his friends decided to go to Walmart to steal beer. They had a huge party at Ethan's house. They're drinking beer, taking shots, playing games before Ethan decides that he's going to drive to a convenience store. Ethan and 7 other teenagers loaded into the back of Ethan's dad's truck. They're driving down the road. Ethan is speeding. He's swerving lanes. He's playing chicken with other cars in the road before swerving onto the shoulder and running over Brianna Mitchell, Pastor Brian Jennings, and Shelby and Holly Boyles. All 4 people did tragically pass away, and one of Ethan's friends was ejected from his vehicle and is now permanently paralyzed. He's unable to speak or move at all. And 16-year-old Ethan fled the scene. He just took off, but I guess he was so intoxicated he passed out drunk in a nearby ditch. It was determined that not only was Ethan using substances that night, but he was 3 times the legal limit when he crashed that car. Ethan was arrested, he was being charged as an adult, and they were seeking 20 years in prison. But get this, Ethan had some fancy lawyers that his rich parents paid for, and their defense strategy was that Ethan was suffering from affluenza, meaning that he was too rich to know right from wrong, so he could not be held responsible for this. And it worked. It worked, guys. Talk about rich white privilege, right? Ethan got away with killing 4 people and paralyzing someone for the rest of their lives and walked away with only probation. And he had to spend a teeny bit of time in a fancy, really fancy, nice rehab center that, guess what, was paid for by taxpayers' money, meaning that you paid for that. And after being released from rehab, Ethan went right back to partying. Ethan went to little house parties with his little high school friends, and videos of him partying were posted on social media, which was a huge violation of his probation. So Ethan knew that he was going to get in a lot of trouble. So guess what Ethan did? Just talk about great parenting, right? Ethan convinced his mom to flee the country to Mexico, where Ethan continued to party. He was only found and arrested after he placed a pizza delivery order from his cell phone, because I guess he's also too rich and too dumb to know that they could track his cell phone if you flee the country. After violating his probation and also fleeing the country, Ethan Couch was only sentenced to serve 2 years in prison before being released. So Ethan Couch is free right now. Spent 2 years in prison for killing 4 people, permanently paralyzing someone, violating his probation, and fleeing the country. It's also worth noting that affluenza is not something that is recognized as a real condition or a real defense strategy. This was just made up, and it's really upsetting because it now sets a precedent that other people will be able to use this in the future. The teenager that threw her baby away in the hospital trash can. I'm sure at this point, most of you guys have heard of Alexi Trevizo, or at least have seen clips of her on social media. But there are some pretty recent updates to this case that I'm sure will disgust you just as much as they disgusted me. Before 2023, Alexi Trevizo was like any other teenage girl. She was a good girl. She never really got in any trouble. She had a high GPA. She already had gotten accepted into the New Mexico State University. She had a lot of friends. She had a long-term boyfriend. She had been dating for well over 2 years. And Alexi was a cheerleader. On January 27th, 2023, Alexi had been in pain for almost 24 hours straight. Alexi had gotten sick at cheer practice that day, and when she went home, she still had this severe back pain and stomach pain, so her mother took her to the emergency room. I don't know if it's the same thing for men, but when women go to the hospital or the doctor, it's pretty standard procedure to be given a UA test. Well, this test came back that Alexi was pregnant. Alexi and her mother both look shocked when they're told that Alexi is pregnant, but Alexi is telling the hospital staff that that is actually impossible because she had never even done the deed before. Having a false pregnancy test is extremely rare, but it is possible, so the hospital staff gave Alexi a blood test just to be sure. While waiting for the results of the blood test, Alexi is seen on the hospital surveillance footage literally sprinting to the bathroom. Alexi's mother follows her to the bathroom. She's knocking on the door like, "Hey honey, are you okay?" And Alexi just tells her, "I'm fine mom, I'll be out soon." But the hospital staff is extremely concerned for Alexi. She's been in the bathroom for a very long time at this point. They hear a lot of weird noises coming from the bathroom. They hear the toilet being flushed over and over and over again. They hear the water running, and they hear Alexi grabbing a bunch of paper towels from the paper towel dispenser. Hospital staff is on the other side of the door, and they're asking Alexi if she's okay, if she needs help, and she's not answering them. So they tell Alexi that they're going to be going and getting a key, and they're going to be unlocking that bathroom door and coming in because they're concerned for her. Well, when Alexi hears that the hospital staff is going to be unlocking the door and coming in, she opens the door. 19-year-old Alexi just walks calmly back to her hospital bed like nothing happened. The hospital staff go into the bathroom and there is blood everywhere, and that's when they found the little body of a baby that had been stuffed at the bottom of the trash can in a trash bag. A little full-term baby boy just stuffed in a trash bag, and he was sadly already gone, so the police were called, and that's where the body cam footage that has been spread on social media comes into play.
We discovered a dead baby in the bathroom. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I came out and I didn't know what to do.
Lexi, I told you about this.
But it
I just asked you to tell me the truth.
scared. It was not crying or nothing.
What did you do to it?
Okay, stop right here.
Alexi was only 19 years old. She was a senior in high school. She told them that the baby was born stillborn and it did not cry. She still had to be seen medically because she has just given birth before she was released from the hospital while they awaited to see what came of the baby's autopsy. And it was determined that his cause of death was asphyxiation from being put in that trash bag and not being able to breathe. And then on May 10th, a little over 4 months later, the police came to Alexi's house to arrest her. And Alexi's mother is pissed. She's arguing with the police officers. She does not want them going inside, and she definitely does not want them arresting her daughter. And they're telling her, we are here to arrest your daughter for homicide and tampering with evidence charges. And her mom looks so upset and she's so concerned about the tampering with evidence charge.
Homicide. Open count of homicide. And tampering with evidence.
Tampering with evidence?
Yes.
At the hospital?
Yes.
So, can we see her now?
She was released 6 days later, awaiting trial on a $100,000 bond, and after she was released, she hung out with friends and she went to prom. Her trial was meant to start this month, actually in only a couple days, but it was delayed, and hopefully it's going to start in October. Alexi's lawyer not only claims that the baby was born stillborn, but that Alexi actually had no idea that she was pregnant, and get this, her lawyer also claims that this is all the hospital's fault and that the hospital failed Alexi and her baby. And Alexi and her lawyer actually extremely recently sued the hospital for the wrongful death of her baby because Alexi should have never been able to go into the bathroom in the first place. That's what they're saying. This is very confusing to me personally because the hospital staff was trying to get into the bathroom to help her for over 20 minutes. But let me know what you guys think. Personally, I do not think that this lawsuit is going to go anywhere, and this is just like some kind of defense strategy that they came up with. This lawsuit is even more disgusting because the hospital staff that day is extremely traumatized because of this. These are people that went into the medical field and dedicated their lives to save lives, and they were never even given a chance to save Alexi's baby. Hospitals are also a safe haven place, if you did not know this, where mothers can surrender their babies, no questions asked. So Alexi's decisions that day, to me personally, seem like she just didn't want anyone to know that she was pregnant, she had a baby, and yeah, she just didn't want anyone finding out. How's that working out for you, Alexi? I actually have a really hard time that no one knew that Alexi was pregnant. She claims that she didn't know, her boyfriend claims that she did not know, her friends, her teachers, her mom all claim that they did not know that she was pregnant, but I've seen photos of her before she gave birth and she looks pregnant.
This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.
This is a terrifying, gruesome true crime case that is going to ruin your day. in more ways than one. After a totally normal night out with friends, 27-year-old Allison Botha drove back to her apartment. She parked her car in a different place than she usually parked, but as soon as she did park, a man with a weapon forced himself into her car and forced Allison into the passenger seat. Before Allison could even fully understand what was going on, because it happened so fast, she's now kidnapped in her own vehicle and her kidnapper is driving her car down the road. The kidnapper was telling Allison that he was not going to hurt her, but when the kidnapper drove into a second location and picked up an accomplice, it became clear to Allison that these men had a sinister plan for her. What happened to 27-year-old Allison Botha next is extremely graphic and gruesome, so just a warning, don't be like eating snacks or anything during this video. Two men drove her into a secluded area and parked her car there, and they told her, "This is where we're going to SA you now," and then they asked her if she was going to resist, and to survive, she told them, "No, I won't resist." After both men brutally SA'd Allison, they decided that then they were going to end her life. Allison was stabbed over 30 times in her stomach, like 35, 37 times. There were so many stabs that they actually couldn't determine how many there was. And then she survived that somehow. So then the men slashed her throat 16 times. There were over 50 cut marks on Allison's body. And then one of the men asked the other one if he thought that Allison was dead now, and that man responded, "Yes, she's definitely dead. Nobody could survive that." What they did not know is Allison did survive that, and she was playing dead, listening to everything they were saying, including their real names, their first names. So when the attackers drove off, Allison was laying there and she knew that she was probably going to die. She was laying in the sand, no clothes, bleeding everywhere, but she found the strength to write her attackers' names in the sand with her finger, and then under that she wrote, "I love mom." So when they found her body, her mom would know that she was thinking about her. That absolutely tore me up when I read that, by the way. I couldn't even imagine the fear and pain that Allison was feeling while she was lying there, knowing that she was probably going to die. But then the unthinkable happened. Allison didn't die, and she found the strength to get up and get herself to somewhere safe with someone that would help her. But once Allison stood up, she realized how severe her injuries actually were. Because of all the injuries to Allison's stomach, her intestines were outside of her body. So she had to like hold her one hand here to keep her insides like inside of her body. Then she's realizing that her head keeps falling back, and that's because due to all the cuts to her neck, she was nearly decapitated. Her head is hanging on like by a string. So with one hand, she's holding her stomach to keep her intestines from coming out, and then with her other hand, she's holding her head in place, and she starts walking down the road like that. The first car to drive by and see Allison, and honestly I couldn't even imagine what she probably looked like, did stop but then changed their mind and kept driving down the road. But the next car to drive by luckily did stop to help Allison. A gentleman that was in that car named Tien was like an actual angel. He was actually in school studying to become a vet, so he had, you know, like some kind of medical education at this time. He did his best to give her medical and emotional help while they waited for the paramedics to arrive, which, you know, for some reason it took almost 2 hours for the ambulance to get there and like 4 phone calls. But regardless, he was doing his best to keep her awake during that time. He was even telling her, "You have the most beautiful eyes, please keep them open." And by some miracle, Allison Botha did survive this gruesome, awful attack. And she actually made an almost full recovery as well. I mean, physically. I'm sure the mental wounds took longer to heal than the physical ones. Allison was quickly able to identify her attackers, these scum of the earth rats, Franz and Tiens. These men were serial R-worders and had recently been arrested for 3 total counts of SAing women, but the judge had released them with no bail or anything right before Allison's attack. while they awaited their trials. It's actually said that these, I'm not even gonna call them men, they're scummy rats, were confused that they were being arrested with attempted murder because they could not believe that Allison survived all those wounds that they inflicted on her. Tiens was sentenced to life in prison plus 25 years without the possibility of parole, and Franz was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. But sadly, and we've talked about this before, sometimes life in prison without the possibility of parole does not mean life in prison without the possibility of parole, because only last year in July of 2023, it was decided that these scummy rats would be released from prison. So right now, at this very minute, they are out somewhere in the world, free with the rest of us. This is a case of a man that was able to manipulate a woman so much that he was able to convince her to let him kill her. This is something out of a nightmare. Today's case that we're discussing is extremely creepy, and we're also going to be discussing some really sensitive topics. So just a warning right now that this is going to get dark. This is also the first case that we're ever going to be discussing out of Ireland. It's really, really well known in Ireland, but really not that well known around the rest of the world. Elaine O'Hara was a very vulnerable woman. Elaine was a victim of relentless bullying throughout her childhood. She suffered from a lot of mental health problems, including severe depression, which she was hospitalized for at a very young age, and she would be in and out of psychiatric institutes all throughout her adulthood. Elaine became extremely close to her doctor that she saw for her mental health, but he suddenly passed away shortly after her mother passed away, leaving her with little to no support system. As an adult, Elaine was very vulnerable. She was very lonely. She had incredibly low self-esteem, as well as being severely depressed, and she was desperate for some kind of companionship in her life, which is human nature. In the summer of 2012, Elaine was 36 years old and she attempted to unalive herself. This was not the first time that she attempted this, and for this most recent attempt, she was once again admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Elaine was released from the hospital on August 22nd, 2012, and the exact same day that she was released, she mysteriously disappeared. The evidence pointed towards the fact that Elaine probably unalived herself despite not finding a body, and that's where this case stood for over a year. And then in August of 2013, about a 30-minute drive from where Elaine was last seen, a couple men that were just trying to have a peaceful day fishing at a local reservoir stumbled across a duffel bag. And inside the bag were some clothes, as well as handcuffs, restraints, as well as some other adult items. So this is clearly odd, so they alerted the authorities, and then they did some more searches of the same reservoir where they found some of Elaine's belongings, as well as some more handcuffs, a sharp weapon, as well as a leather mask, and then 2 burner phones. And the conversations that Elaine was having on these phones was very shocking and very disturbing. Before we get into all of that, let's talk about the man that Elaine had been talking to. It was this man right here, this married father of 3, Graham Dwyer. On the outside, Graham was an extremely charismatic, normal guy. I mean, how many times have we heard that before, right? But on the inside, Graham had some incredibly dark fantasies. Actually, just saying dark would be a massive understatement. This was just plain evil. Graham had a fantasy about unaliving a woman with a sharp object while they were doing the deed. So since Graham's wife wasn't really into that kind of thing, he made an account on an alternative dating website. Think 50 Shades of Grey. And it was on this website that Graham first made contact with Elaine back in 2007, so 5 years before she disappeared. They spoke online for a few months before starting an in-person affair in 2008, but by 2009, they weren't seeing each other anymore. They weren't communicating. The affair had run its course until he hit her up out of the blue in 2011. This time, Graham's intentions were a lot more extreme than the last time they saw each other 3 years ago. Graham knew Elaine very well. He knew how vulnerable she was, and he used that to manipulate her. Graham gave Elaine a burner phone, told her to only talk to him through that, and he already put his number in the phone under the contact master. And then he manipulated this very vulnerable woman who was already really depressed into thinking that she should no longer, be here. She should pass away. He would tell her that if she wanted to unalive herself, that she should just let him do it so they could both get something out of it. I would not even be able to share with you the texts that he would send her because they were that disturbing and messed up, but you can easily find them online if you want to. But again, do it at your own risk. He would text her things like, "It's all gonna be worth it when I kill you," smiley face. That's like the most PG one that I could tell you. There would be days that Elaine was a willing participant in this role-playing exercise, but there would be other days that Elaine would tell Graham that all she really wanted was a loving relationship, like a real boyfriend, and to one day have a family and have children. The month before Elaine disappeared, when she attempted to unalive herself and was admitted into that hospital, she did not tell Graham that she was planning on doing this, and he was mad. And he wasn't mad because his girlfriend, that he's known for 5 years, tried to hurt herself. He was mad that she didn't let him do it for her. And somehow, even though she was in this hospital, she still had that burner phone, and he was like texting her and calling her nonstop while she's in the hospital. Texting her things like, "Why would you do that? Why didn't you let me do it for you? You need to get out of that hospital right now because you need to be punished." But at this point, Elaine was expressing interest in getting better. She didn't want to pass away anymore. She didn't want to see Graham because she knew what he would do if she did. But Graham convinced Elaine that he was only going to punish her, that he was not going to unalive her. So she left the hospital. She met up with Graham. He lured her into the mountains where he went back on his promise and he took her life. Elaine's partial remains were found around the same time that all those items were found in the reservoir. And investigators had a pretty clear person of interest because it was spelled out for them in black and white. At first, Graham tried to tell them that he did not know who Elaine was, but that's not true, obviously, and they found his male DNA in her bed, and then he was like, "Yeah, we were having an affair, but I didn't do anything to her." But that's clearly not true either, because they have all the messages, and they even had videos of him doing things to her, so they know it's not true. And then at one point, I think they even tried to say that, it's consensual. It was all consensual, but none of it worked. Graham was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He's tried multiple times to appeal this, but as of 2024, he has exhausted all of his legal options, so he will be behind bars for the rest of his life. As of just a few weeks ago, I saw that apparently there's a woman trying to start a relationship with Graham while he's behind bars. If that's you and you're watching this, you're corny and a loser. Like, I don't even care. Women that try to date serial killers and date killers and treat them like they're rock stars are just weird. And like, that needs to be studied. This is such an unusual case. I don't even think that there's another one like it out there. And I really do think that Graham thought that he was like smart enough to get away with it. It's clear that he picked the most like vulnerable woman possible that he thought he could manipulate. And my heart truly breaks for Elaine because it's clear that she was suffering with a lot of things and was just desperate for any kind of companionship and any kind of love. And it is true what they say, that people accept the love that they think they deserve.